It's said that 60% of families lose their wealth in the second generation, and 90% the generation after that. But how many families lose an entire empire? Today we're going to have a case study of someone that fumbled an entire empire and how not to be that guy. Louis XVI, born August 23rd, 1754, 12 miles outside of Paris in a magnificent palace called Versailles, created by his grandfather Louis XIV, aka the Sun King. In his early childhood, he was described as a fat, ill-bred boy. He was pudgy and shy and continued that throughout his life. At 14 years old, he was said to be married to Marie Antoinette. She was a royal from Austria. Now this was important because France and Austria had been bitter rivals for a long time. So this marriage kind of solidified their newfound unity. But neither Louis or Marie had very much interest in ruling. They were obviously teens when they were married, in their early 20s when they became king and queen. And speaking of king, Louis XVI went on to become king at around 20 years old when his father Louis XV died. And Louis XV died as a very unpopular ruler, primarily because he was involved in the 7 Years' War, which was a war between France and Britain, which France lost. And not only did they lose it, it basically bankrupted the country of France. So that's kind of the situation that Louis XVI is coming into. And Marie Antoinette's primary function as queen, as all queens, is to produce a male heir to take the throne. However, this took over 7 years, which caused rumors about Louis XVI's manliness.
He is gay. He is a gay man. He can deny it all he wants. He's a homosexual person.
He had a lot of useless hobbies. Such as locksmithing, definitely eating, and basically everything but paying attention to his country's affairs. And one article actually came out ridiculing him, saying the locksmith couldn't find the keyhole, referencing him not having an heir. The same tabloid-like magazine figured that Marie was getting sex somewhere, and if it wasn't from the king, then it had to be from somebody else, so she kind of developed a reputation as a whore queen.
Nigga, we caught you. Nigga, we done got them caught you, my boy.
But it was later found that he had a condition where it was actually painful for him to have an erection.
What? What?
Couldn't imagine. But once they figured out what was going on with him and he actually agreed to have the surgery to correct it, they end up having 4 kids together. So problem solved there. But they're not the only family that's growing. During the 18th century, France actually grew from 20 million to 26 million. Okay, so now Louis is king, you gotta start making some decisions. So a couple of decisions he makes. Granting more freedom of press. Ironically, the same press that was ridiculing him and his manliness, ridiculing his wife's whoreness, and starting to talk about the problems that the country was facing, and now had more freedom. But I consider that as a just thing to do. And funding the American Revolution. So as kind of a payback to Britain for his father losing the war against them, he was undermining them by funding the American colonies to fight back against England. As I mentioned earlier, France was kind of bankrupt at the time, so they didn't have the money to do it. So they took loans out to help fund the American Revolution. Similar to how the US kind of funds places to go against Russia during the Cold War, at least, without directly being in conflict with them. The enemy of your enemy is your enemy, sort of thing. So besides France not only being bankrupt, but in debt, inclement weather starts to cause crop failures. It's a depression, can't really get a job. Agriculturally, things are bad, so people can barely eat. So seeing the writing on the wall, Louis was forced to get a new finance minister, Jacques Necker. Jacques Necker became the new finance minister because the aristocrats suggested him and the regular people also trusted him. So he was an obvious choice for the job. So he comes in to balance the budget and figure out how we're going to pay everything off and get back to being one of the global powers of the world. There's a couple important things that he does though. One, he makes the budget public so regular citizens can actually see where the money's going, which causes some concern, similar to US aid sending money all over the world for bizarre things. And He suggested a meeting of the Estates General. And what this is three parties. You have the clergy, which is the church. You have the nobles, the higher class. And you have the third estate, which is everybody else. And his plan when doing this is to raise taxes. Now, who pays taxes? The clergy doesn't pay taxes. The nobles pays little to no taxes. And the third estate, the working class people, everybody else pays all the taxes. Not only do they pay all the taxes for the country, they actually pay taxes to the nobles and the clergy as well. And his plan with doing this is to basically tell the third estate that taxes must be raised to get out of this problem. Now, this is sort of like a bargain because it's a voting system. To get them to say yes to having their taxes raised, obviously he's going to have some bargaining chips and offer them things. But he wants to raise the taxes as much as he can with giving as little concessions as possible.
Where's all your money gone, Daddy?
Taxes. Let me fix my houses.
Bug, it's okay. It's part of the game.
No, it's not.
It
It's
is.
not fun.
It's not fun to what?
It's the worst part of the game.
It's what?
Taxes.
And while he could also raise taxes on the second and first estate, the clergy and the nobles, one, they were too powerful. Two, they didn't respect him enough to go with it. He wasn't a dominant force. Now, his grandfather would have got it done in the snap of a finger. He was very feared and respected. But Louis XVI didn't have that kind of clout. He wasn't really even running the show. And lastly, it was a voting system. So if that's not what happened in the vote, then there's really nothing he can do. So this is kind of a breakdown of the population of each estate. So the third estate, the commoners, were 97% of the population. Church, about 2. Nobles, about 1. A meeting of the General Assembly hadn't taken place in over 175 years because they hadn't needed to. So the third estate had about 175 years of grievances or things they wanted to have change kind of built up coming to this meeting, right? And they had people like Georges Danton, Maximilien Robespierre, and other people representing them and speaking for them. The General Assemblies happened in the magnificent Palace of Versailles, about 12 miles away from Paris, which is in complete chaos, and it's completely opulent. Not only that, the third estate, aka the commoners, have 1 vote, even though they're 97% of the population. The clergy has 1, and the nobles have 1. So even though they represent the vast majority of the population, they keep being outvoted by the other 2 who team up together. It's said that democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. And in this case, that's definitely what it was. So they keep meeting every day, and the third estate keeps getting outvoted, even though they have people, representatives making passionate speeches and making a lot of sense. It's kind of falling on deaf ears because the other 2 are going to look out for their self-interest. And the king kind of just sits back passively and watches what's going on. He has to be there, but he's not really taking too much part in it. He's not really making speeches, and he's not giving his input. He's kind of just sitting back. So out of frustration, after a while, June 20th, 1789, the third estate says, you know what? We're the country. The other 2 don't count. So what we're gonna do is we're amongst ourselves and they'll make all the votes and all the decisions. And y'all would just have to deal with it. And they come in that day, June 20th, and they're locked out. Everybody else said, I don't know who y'all think y'all are. So they said, okay. And they go across the street to a tennis and they say, we're gonna stay here until we have a constitutional monarchy, right? It's okay to have a king, but we need our rights as citizens. The system isn't fair and we're not feeling it at all. Now this is a very pivotal point in time for Louis because you have the population basically that's upset and they want to have some rights granted to them. Now, you weren't planning to give them anything that they're asking for, or a very small percentage of it. On the other hand, you have the more powerful clergy and nobles who you grew up with in your ear. Your aides and the people that help you make all these decisions are a part of that group. So you're leaning towards them a lot like when a president has aides because he can't know everything. So militarily, he'll have generals and high-ranked people tell him what's going on. Militarily, he'll have economic people explain what needs to be done for the economy. Now, all Louis's aides are either church people or nobles. So that's all he's getting in his ear. And he's so gullible and malleable that the last person to basically make an argument to him, he agrees with. Now that the third estate is locked out, he's not even hearing the arguments from them anymore. Instead of making a firm decision and saying either yes or no constitutional monarchy, he tentatively agrees to it. But on the other hand, he starts placing troops all over Paris because he's feeling like they're getting a little too big for their britches. So on one hand, he's saying, yep, you know what, I agree to that. I'll still stay king, but you guys will have more rights. And on the other hand, he's like, I don't think so. I'm gonna wait until it's a good time to strike and basically squash whatever power y'all think y'all have. Also, I'd like to take a second to point out the hypocrisy of, on one hand, you're putting your country into debt by funding the American Revolution, which we thank you for, but you don't have the money for it, so that a group can fight back against the king of their country. And on the other hand, you're using your troops to fight the power of the people who are trying to do something similar to you. Now, I can see why you would do both, but I feel like it's more an emotion thing. You didn't need to fund the American Revolution. That really had nothing to do with you, but it's not your money. Two, you should have made a firm decision whether or not to consent to the constitutional monarchy rather than agreeing, but sneaking around strategically to disagree. So seeing the writing on the wall and not wanting to lose the momentum that they had gained from getting the constitutional monarchy, the people of France riot. When they see all the troops coming around, they know that if they don't do something, all the stuff they work for is going to be taken from them. So to fight against troops, you need to be armed. They storm a couple places, but the most important place is a prison called the Bastille. And that's where political prisoners go. The king will send you to the Bastille. It's basically a giant castle. They decide to storm it. Now, mind you, these aren't the people that are meeting at the Estates General. These are just common people that are tired of the situation. Remember, economic depression, we have hyperinflation, we have food shortages, and we're in a dire situation. So they storm the Bastille. We have guns from the Bastille, gunpowder, obviously needed, and we let all the prisoners go. Even though there were only 7, they were political prisoners, so it kind of meant more. And the warden or the general that led the prison, they leave with his severed head on a pike. So an angry, vicious mob, with now between 30 to 40,000 muskets, just exerted their force with little to no consequences. And back at the Versailles, mind you, this is 12 miles away, but at that time, it might as well have been 50. The king is woefully ignorant. He's doing his own thing. He's heard about what's going on, but he doesn't really understand the full scope of it. And it said that when he was asking, well, why are they doing this? He had to have it explained to him about the food shortage and the wheat crop being destroyed due to weather, and that nobody had anything to eat, even bread. It's reported that when this happened, Marie Antoinette said, well, just let them eat cake. They're so disconnected from the plight of the everyday citizen that they're not even understanding the severity of a food shortage. Now, whether she said it or not, these are things that are being reported in the paper, right? Because we have the freedom of press now. So now we have different publications that are being spread around, whether they're rumors or they're true, that are also riding people up. Because think about it, you're starving to death and the queen of your country says, well, just have some cake. It's what cake? So it's kind of pandemonium. Not only are they storming prisons and other government places, they're also attacking nobles in their homes. So obviously the nobles, they see the writing on the wall. So they actually start picking political parties within the third estate to kind of fall under. We have hyperinflation and food shortages, and the price of bread went up 10x. So imagine having to pay $30 to $50 for a loaf of bread and you're already struggling, right? You're gonna feel very desperate. This desperation mixed with the press saying that Marie Antoinette, the queen, was hoarding wheat in the Palace of Versailles. This time it was the women's turn, and they went to go confront her. So a couple hundred people come to Versailles, which is obviously a big estate. There's plenty of room. There's the main palace, but there's a lot of gardens and things surrounding it. They're basically on the king's front lawn, protesting and screaming, "Give us the food, we know you got it." And even from the outside, you can see how lavishly they're living. Louis sees what's going on. He's up in his palace, but he's not worried about it. He's, again, passive. He figures there's a couple hundred people outside protesting. Well, they'll tire themselves out. I got guards. I'm not really worried about it. So he just goes about his day. Then overnight, the crowd grows as word starts to spread. They get a mob mentality. And before you know it, early in the morning, there's 7,000 people outside, angry, wanting explanations, wanting the food that they feel is being hoarded in there. Obviously, looking at Louis, he's not missing no meals. And as I said, this group is mostly comprised of women, working class women who work at the docks cutting fish. Most of them are armed with knives and daggers. Once that mob mentality kicks in, you never know what's going to happen. So they storm the palace. And they're looking for the queen because she's, through articles and media, she's to blame for a lot of things. So she nearly gets away only because they have secret passages, right? She's in a escape room, but they end up reaching her bedroom and literally stab and rip her bed to pieces. They declare that they're not leaving until the king and queen come back to Paris with them. Because out here in Versailles, they're living too nice. And you know what? We feel like y'all do have food in here. Y'all have a lot of things in here. So why don't y'all come with us so we can keep an eye on you, so you can kind of stop this BS. Now look at this. Louis sees the problem outside initially, and instead of taking precautions not only to maintain some peace and respect for the monarchy, but also to protect his direct family, instead of that, he shrugs it off. Now look at you. Now you're forced by your citizens to go to Paris, to the older castle, right? You're having to downgrade a little bit. You're still in the castle though, in Paris. And effectively, you're hostage at this point, you and your family, to the people. So you're in your palace. Now the National Assembly is bringing every law that they want signed for you to pass, and you're having no choice but to sign it. Also, the National Assembly kind of splinters into different political groups, all under the same umbrella. There's starting to be mass arrests, and accompanied with these arrests are mass executions of people who are counter-revolutionary or don't represent what the Third Estate is trying to accomplish. So you're seeing this, and now you're in a situation of desperation. While you're going along with everything just to save yourself and your family, your wife is writing back to her Austrian royal relatives explaining the situation, and they're determined to help you, one, because the safety of their family member, but two, because all these European countries have monarchs, right? So if this can happen to the King of France, basically being arrested by his own people, then what's to really stop that from happening in their countries? That's what you're banking on. You're banking on help from foreign nations now because you've lost all control in your country. So Marie is penning these letters, and she's getting encouragement, and they decide, you know what, we can't do much from where we are now, but if we sneak out to Austria, right, cross the border, we'll get picked up, we'll go meet the king there, and then we'll come back with troops and we'll murder and squash this whole rebellion, and then regain our control of the country, then put our foot down, and things will be back better. The family piles into a wagon. And you know what? It's very stupid, but especially the way he grew up, I couldn't even imagine he would know anything else. He gets into him and his family, an illustrious wagon. So it's like trying to be inconspicuous, sneaking out of a country, but you're driving a Rolls Royce or a Lamborghini, trying not to be noticed, right? But again, I'm sure he's never ridden anything but the best. So obviously he stopped at the border, and they check for your passport before you go into another country. The guy that's checking his is saying to himself, this is King Louis. Literally the king of my country. Should I let him go? Or I know he's under arrest. Should I let him go, or should I challenge him? He is my king. Now look at this. If you're working Border Patrol or anything else, and you stop a president, or even a former president, and you see that the president, automatically you're gonna, oh, go ahead, sorry about that. The lack of respect for not only him, but the monarchy in general at this point. The guy's actually questioning what he should do. Now, this particular guy is questioning it. Two more come over that are very sturgeon revolutionaries, and they see him, they say, what the fuck are you doing? Oh, you're fleeing. Take the decision completely out of the first guy's hand, and they say, you know what, let's escort him back to the castle, right? And Louis doesn't do himself favors either. Obviously, if he was a good orator or he had a commanding presence, he probably could have got through the checkpoint. I'm sure there's a lot of ways he could have got through the checkpoint. But he just sits there sweating, basically. I imagine him just looking real clammy and nervous. He's escorted by guards now back to the Tuileries Palace where he's been staying. Now he's labeled in papers that are telling about what's going on. A rat that tried to sneak out, a traitor to the country, and they're letting the people know that he was going to come back and murder all of you. So now he's officially arrested and put on trial. The other kings of other countries are still saying, we got your back, heard about what happened. King of Prussia, who's actually aligned with Austria, who's aligned with France, said if he's harmed at all, that Paris is going to burn to the ground. But the General Assembly said, fuck what y'all talking about. Trial, guilty. Now, what do we do with him? It's not like he's just a regular citizen, even though he is guilty, and at this time, guilty verdict basically meant execution. Do we really want to kill the king? So it was split to where one faction wanted to just have him as a figurehead. Absolutely no power, no decision making, just the king entitled. And another group said, well, as long as he's living, these other countries are going to come try to help him get back into power. And he's obviously going to help his own cause, so it's too dangerous to leave him alive. He was sentenced to death in 1973 by guillotine, which was the preferred form of execution at this time. It was used so much it was actually called the National Razor. And 9 months after, the queen was also executed. Same blade, the same way. So there you have it. A disinterested, spoiled king who had absolutely no business being in power. He had no spine, and he was swayed by whoever the last person he talked with. A person who tried to appease everybody while being liked by nobody. He was a greedy pig who found himself in a lion's den, being surrounded by nothing but hungry lions with no means or no willingness to actually defend himself. He became just another one of the thousands whose blood stained the carpet red for the next tyrant of France, and to give another example of how not to wield power but to let it destroy you. Part 2, the architect of the terror.